Hi, welcome everyone. This is our 5th webinar on transformative movement building. Some of you joined us for one or more of the first 3. Welcome back, or first 4 rather. Welcome back. Some of you are joining for the first time. Thanks for joining us today. We've had some really great introductions through the chat function. When you're using the chat, make sure that it is addressed to everyone. Some of them are coming just to the panelists. So there's a drop-down menu right above the chat box where you can change who it's addressed to. So we've been hearing from folks or reading from folks the geographic area of your work, and we have people across the country and even some internationally. I see Georgia, California, Vermont, Germany, and different places all across the US. And some really great qualities that help us navigate through different situations. So feel free to keep sharing through the chat function as we go through the presentation. So welcome to the 5th of 6 webinars on transformative movement building. This is a collaboration between Movement Strategy Center and Move to End Violence. My name is Jovida. I'm a senior fellow at Movement Strategy Center, and I will be your MC for today. We're really excited to present this series. Movement Strategy Center has been a longtime partner of Move to End Violence, which is a program of the Novo Foundation that aims to strengthen leaders, organizations, and the movement as a whole to end violence against all girls and women. Over the years of this partnership, we have informed and shaped each other's work. This series is an opportunity to share this work with all of you and anyone that is interested in how to build powerful movements for social change. We hope these webinars will introduce some shared language and concepts and help spark more conversations about the kind of movements we need and how we'll get there. So as I mentioned, this is the 5th of a 6-part series. The first one introduced some core concepts, such as the idea that transformative movement building shifts the way we think, our structures, systems, the way we live, and even who we are. Today we're exploring strategic navigation in movement building. Navigating our rapidly changing world requires adaptation and flexibility. This requires us to be different to be able to advance towards our goals. In the previous webinars, we explored vision and purpose, deep embodiment, and radical connection, and we'll call on all of these as we navigate. Today, we're going to be exploring the physics of movement building, understand the strategic value and strength of networked action, and we'll introduce the idea of using a strategic compass to navigate. A few quick housekeeping items as we get started. We are recording this webinar, and you will be able to request the link on the Move to End Violence website within the next day or so. In fact, it may already be live. Not the recording, sorry, the slide deck may already be live. If you're watching and sharing through social media, you can use the hashtag transformative movements with no spaces. We've reserved some time for questions and answers towards the end. And there are other ways for you to participate before then if you are connected through the webinar platform. In the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a couple of options. The Q&A allows you to ask a question directly to the panelists. We'll keep an eye on these throughout the session, and we'll also return to some of these questions during the Q&A at the end. And you can continue to use the chat feature to communicate in real time with everyone on the webinar or directly to specific people. I also want to mention that we are offering this webinar in Spanish, so we have some simultaneous translation going on through conference line. And you may see us doing some navigation in real time to manage those logistics. We're really fortunate to have Maria Jimenez of Mujeres Unidas y Activas with us today. She'll be sharing the story of how vision, embodiment, and connection all come together in strategic navigation. First, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mimi Ho, who will give us some context about strategic navigation in transformative movement building.
Hi, thank you, Jovida, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're really thrilled to have you, and it's a particularly poignant time for all of us to talk about strategy. So, you know, it's interesting, I first got my start in organizing at a pretty grim moment in California. I was a young new organizer, and I just landed in California during the 1990s racist initiative wars, attacks on immigrants, young people, affirmative action, and Proposition 187 had just passed, taking social services from undocumented children. Our Governor Pete Wilson, anti-immigrant, tough on crime, were driving immigrants and people of color into the shadows and into fear, deep fear. And Proposition 209, a proposition to eliminate affirmative action, was coming down the pike. So a moment where we thought all was lost. People were afraid for their families. Undocumented children were scared, families. And it was a moment that certainly is a fraction of the grim situation we have now in this country. But the silver lining, and I do deeply believe and know that we are going to turn this moment into a similar moment where we galvanized a vibrant social movement that was determined to turn back the tide and step into the task of building political power for our communities. That moment then has a lot to say about now. So I was very lucky. I landed at a place called Californians for Justice, a movement building formation that came together with the audacious vision and strategy that people who vote in California need to reflect who lives in California. That the numbers of people who vote, from people of color, communities of color, women, poor and working class people, young people, immigrants, that those people, we all had to vote at the same numbers that we actually live in this state. And that we would take the offensive. Our best defense wasn't offense. By building long-term progressive electoral infrastructure out of these fights against these racist ballot initiatives. This was also where I met other amazing movement organizations like Mujeres Unidas and Maria, and walked precincts out in the rain, I remember very clearly, with the MUA folks. So along with others, we brought together the transformative movement building elements that we've been talking about in these webinars. Big vision, an embodied sense of hope, a commitment to relationships that clearly has lasted over 20 years, Maria, and the long-term nitty-gritty strategy of building electoral precinct operations across the state. So after a couple years of intense building, sadly, Proposition 209 did pass and affirmative action was deemed illegal in California. However, a long-term strategic objective was set and a fire was lit in people to transform movement and electoral capacity. 20 years later now, earlier this month, when the electoral results across the country were grim, California was one of the bright lights. We voted a progressive woman of color into the Senate, passed progressive ballot measures at the state and local levels, passed a renters' rights initiative here in Oakland. It was with that big vision, strategy, commitment, and fire in our belly that helped shift the terrain. And through relentless organizing on the ground, the spirit of our communities, and sharp, committed, long-term strategy, We can shift the terrain from the hopeless place we were in during the 1990s, and that lesson is needed now more than ever. So for those of you who have been with us in this transformative webinar series, there are 4 elements of transformative movement building: vision and purpose, embodiment and practices, radical connection and relationship, and the 4th element we're talking about today, strategic navigation, is absolutely built on those first 3. Strategy is not static. It's not just a strategy chart and formula, as I was taught when I first organized. Conditions change all the time. We are human, and we have different capacities in different moments. We may find that the reality of a situation is completely different than what we expected. That's why we talk about strategic navigation. It's not a fixed strategy, we are navigating. And our navigation tools are this compass. Our vision helps us set direction. It is what we're moving towards. And I saw people in the chat talk about this. Our purpose, which is the fire in our belly that motivates us towards that vision, can serve as a reference point as we move. Another huge point, and I think this is one of the most left out points in strategy, is our team. The crew that we have along the ride is actually the one that we have the most control over and the one that is the most impactful and transformative. And then practice. How do we be that crew, and how do we embody the qualities we want to see in the world in ourselves, so that with every step of the journey, we can actually create that new world? So adaptive learning and action is critical because strategy is not fixed, it's not linear. And therefore, strategic navigation requires learning and action, adapting as we learn from successes and mistakes. All kinds of things change. We just talked about our purpose, our team, conditions. So we need to hone in on the strategic factor that we can impact, the human element. People use this term fail forward all the time. It's very trendy, but it actually has a lot of truth. Experimentation requires mistakes. If we make no mistakes, we're being way too cautious. We have to adapt and learn. So in the chat function, share a couple of examples of mistakes that you made, that you learned from, that brought you to another level. Course corrections along the way are the way we navigate. So the human element in this moment, in this historical moment, is a critical one. Our courage and hearts and how we choose to show up creates very different possibilities and strategic paths. Do we give in to fear and hate? Or do we step forward and choose to lead with love? It's going to take a choice, an active one, in every moment. And the situation is going to get worse and worse. We have to keep choosing fierce love even more relentlessly in this moment. This morning, the Movement Strategy Center just launched a Lead with Love campaign to ask everyone to pledge to move boldly forward, grounded in fierce love. We will explore this example, and just as a plug, we want every single person on this webinar to sign this pledge when we finish. We need to be able to show each other and see each other in this moment, people who are lifting up the values that we care deeply about. And so this is a key part of what we're posing as transformative strategy. Instead of just asking, what do we do in this moment? We need to be asking, who do we need to be to create the transformation needed in this world? So movement building is an art and a science. It has the elements that we've talked about in our previous webinars: audacious vision, deep embodiment, radical connection. And transformative movement makers are navigating strategically and adaptively through rapidly changing environments towards an emergent future. Transformative movement makers use transformative strategies to generate nonlinear, synergistic, and highly networked action. And what we mean by that is action that may take different strategies, different paths, but are in deep coordination and communication with each other. With that kind of division of labor and that kind of experimentation where we leverage everyone's strengths, only that way can we make the big leaps towards a new society, even as we dismantle the old systems that no longer serve us. So movement building has art and science. And the science of movement building, the physics, the movement building is actually quite a physical thing. We're literally trying to move millions of people into action in a direction, in a similar direction. Not in the same exact path, but in a directional vision. And so elements of strategic thinking and movement building flow from these elements of physics. And it's about how different pieces move and are in relationship with each other. There are some concepts. So we need to be anticipating and asking the question, what do we need to be prepared for? What is not just in front of us, in our face, attacking us, but what is happening down the line? What's happening in January and February after the hullabaloo of the inauguration is over? All the flurry of actions. How can we anticipate in this moment where we need to be in February, March, in 2 years, in 4 years, and in 20 years? Positioning. How does our action further our specific and overall goals? Leveraging. How will this action or the work we do put us in a better place to do what we need to do down the pike? Are we utilizing opportunities in the landscape? Is there an opening for us to take action? Are we being flexible? Do we have the agility to move? Do we have the spaciousness and room in our crammed work plans to actually move into a new direction? What is the awareness that we need to know? And do we have people in place that have the best information? So this is a huge set of concepts, and we won't get to these today. However, I want to hammer home the point that one of the most basic capacities that we can build in order to deepen our strategic capacity and our strategic thinking is spaciousness. We have a habit of overcrowding our work plans, overcrowding our day, multitasking, being on our phones, multitasking, and we equate being busy with productivity, when actually less is more. Spaciousness allows us to be much more aware, have peripheral vision, to anticipate, to use our other senses besides our tired brains to sense and feel opportunities so that we can position and leverage. That spaciousness gives us room to move and gives us awareness. And there are, as I mentioned, networked action. There are many paths up to the vision of the mountain that we are scaling. And it is essential that we have many paths and many crews moving and exploring. And the paths to the mountaintop may be different, and some people might be thwarted along the way. There might be barriers. Some of us will be tired. There will be trees in our path. So that kind of experimentation and having many paths is critical so that the few that are able to scale to the top can bring all of us and bring all of our vision forward. And this is building a bigger we is a critical one, which is how we're not just building our tiny strategies. This is a moment where we need a bigger we. This political moment is an incredible example of the need for many simultaneous strategies and experiments. We need all of our strategies to win. And movements of today are uniting across different approaches to social change, to identify the unique strengths and contributions we can make when we are connected to each other through shared purpose and values. I have been incredibly heartened by the maturity and the growth of our movements, our people. We are actually able to step back and let go of our ego, share funding, give credit, when we are able to hold our big purposes at the front. And this moment is like no other. We have to be above the fray and build that bigger we and cut our habits of competition. And so you see on the screen, there's a range of all kinds of important strengths across our ecosystem. people who serve and meet conditions, resist, reform, govern, and creating the new world that is yet to be, creating the pathways that we are excited to build in. And I know that in the movements to end gender-based violence, you are all in a vibrant debate and a vibrant transformation where you're building capacities and roles and moving across the spectrum. And I hear you talk about the importance of not just surviving, but thriving. And I hear you talking about how do we govern, how do we create, how do we connect up with movements from other parts of the field, and also with the unusual suspects, with our families, with our communities, who just need a pathway forward to have someone reach out to them. This is one of those moments, and I'm so excited that we have people on this webinar building together. So in this moment where we are being attacked and the forces of hate are rearing, have always been there, but are even more explicit, and there are many people who are realizing how strong those forces can be, we need all of us. We need people to ground in bold vision. We need people to gather and build community. We need to protect and care for each other, to resist. We need the variety of all these different forms of action. And it's, again, with the spirit of experimentation, adaptiveness, and also we need to be mindful that people have different strengths, different appetites, and need different strategies to connect them. And there are healers amongst us. There are elders. There are young people with vibrant new energy. I'm sure many of you have been hearing and been motivated by many of the young people protesting across the country. We need all of us in this moment. We need people on the inside resisting. So it is with that spirit that we're meeting this moment today, and doing that all with leading with love at our core purpose. So critical mass. I want to ask everyone on this webinar to reflect on a moment when one or two people were able to shift the tone of a meeting, the trajectory of an effort. Maybe you were that catalyst. Maybe it was a colleague. I'm sure we can think of many negative examples of shifting dynamics, but I know we also have many positive examples. We, of course, need to build millions, and at scale. And in order to change the trajectory of a large set of people, it only takes a few to start setting that leadership and tone. Not by themselves, but connected to the whole. So critical mass is a very important concept and an important actual truth, because if we stymie ourselves until we have millions on board, we're never going to move. So move with who's ready, and think about who you're connected with and how each of those connections can ripple out and add up. So music and the art of movement building. And I just want to name, I'm no musician or physicist, but I hear the two are related. There's a physics to music, and there's a music in physics. So the vibrations and the movement are all part of the same. And so rhythm, I want to highlight rhythm is so important. Timely execution that helps to build momentum. Rhythm, the ebb and flow of actions. So I have a confession to make. I, in my movement work and in organizing work, sometimes go on one speed, which is manic and crazy. So I burnt out after my work in the 90s, fighting initiative after initiative. I was wiped out. I had to take time off, pick myself up, peel myself off the ground, and I was no use to anyone. So rest and ebbs and flows in our campaigns is critical. And thank goodness we're in movement and in team, because when I'm tired, Maria is gonna have energy. When Maria needs to put the mantle down, I can pick it back up. And so it's that kind of rhythm and community. And sometimes we need people to keep a steady pace. As we move into the turn of the year and this political moment, we're going to need people who are thinking 20 years down the line. What are the big values? What are the big strategies? Who do we need to be? And how do we make change now? And we need people who are thinking, how do we resist in this moment? What is happening mid-December that is going to be critical for next year? What do we need to make sure to discredit in this moment? So we want to make sure that we have that strong rhythm in our work. Synergy. Synergy is important because this is about making sure that the sum of our parts, that the sum of our parts is greater than each of us by ourselves. Synergistic movement means working together, and it means making sure to build off each other's strengths. An example that I have is in many campaigns that I've been in, from national healthcare organizing to local community development work, a big movement habit that has really been in the way has been competition, funding, credit, ego, policy versus organizing versus communications, who's more down, which demands are too compromising. And when we've been successful at actually going and saying, you do the inside, I'll do the outside, you have the demand that's actually going to win the day, but my screaming over here about this other demand helps you win. That kind of synergy has a beautiful and powerful effect, and actually helped us win billions of dollars at the national level for Medicaid, because we actually had a legislative fight in Washington, D.C. that was coordinated with press hits and mobilizing across the states, in their local communities and in the cities. Resonance. Music is not beautiful unless we actually give the spaciousness for deep, reverberating sound, for simplicity that can echo. When we have that kind of clarity, simplicity, and repetition, things like Black Lives Matter, things like Fight for 15, things like strong families, simple concepts that can resonate with many people, that is the beauty of the kind of movement building that we're trying to create. And so finally, I want to close with, again, the moment right now. Strategic navigation and strategy sounds mysterious. It is actually about very nitty-gritty movement principles that we just talked about. Vision, embodiment, connection, and relationship. And at the end of the day, it is the crew and it is the humans on the journey and our tenacity, our courage, that is going to be what holds the day right now. And in this moment, it is our fierce love of ourselves for our people. And I would like to read from the pledge that Movement Strategy Center has put together, this Lead with Love pledge. Our power is love. Love for ourselves that nourishes and strengthens us. Love for our families and our peoples gives us courage and perspective. Love for humanity allows us to believe in transformation beyond what seems possible in this moment. Love for our Mother Earth emboldens us for the most visionary action. Thank you all for your fierce love for each other and for people that are far beyond who you know. We need to be connecting at this moment with fierce love, even people who we may think are our enemy. And that is choosing to love in that kind of environment is the bravest action we can take. So now we're going to watch a short video, beautiful video, with a story that illustrates these concepts in action.
Oh, shoot. everyone. We need to troubleshoot the sound for the video. We'll get those straightened out just a moment.
Mi nombre es Ana Hernández, soy mujer Mi nombre es Ana Hernández, soy mujer inmigrante latina, soy de México, Jalisco, madre de 2 niñas, una de 5 y una de 2 años. En ese entonces estaba embarazada de 2 meses, tenía a mi niña 1 año y medio más o menos. Ella escuchaba y lloraba del miedo cuando aparecían los gritos. Me sentía sola porque muchas personas me decían que era normal lo que estaba pasando, pero algo dentro de mí seguía diciendo que eso no estaba bien y que tenía que buscar ayuda. La primera vez que vine a MOA, se estaban ofreciendo clases de inglés y estábamos hablando sobre el tema en inglés de violencia doméstica y lo que ellas estaban describiendo es lo que ella estaba pasando.
Una mayoría llega buscando apoyo, le hablaron de un grupo, porque mujeres no se identifica afuera como una organización de violencia doméstica. Porque si una mujer no ha reconocido o tiene vergüenza, no va a llegar a la organización porque se va a sentir mal.
Yo al principio yo no hablaba. Escuchando a las demás mujeres, me sentí como que estaba en el grupo que tenía que estar, que había confidencialidad y que yo no estaba sola.
Con simplemente hablarlo y sentirse escuchada en su propio idioma, ella siente que se ha descansado.
Y eso me ayudó a hablar, me ayudó a entender que yo estaba dentro de la violencia doméstica.
Estos son los programas de apoyo donde está violencia doméstica, asalto sexual, reuniones de autoestima, yoga, el timón de tu vida, que es muy importante.
Muchas de ellas empiezan a integrar en marchas, empiezan a tomar el entrenamiento de consejeras, empiezan a ir a apoyar también a los shelters o a los refugios, a ser parte de que realmente esta es su organización.
MOA tiene una doble misión: apoyar a la mujer que descubre esa fuerza interior que no ha reconocido, y la segunda parte es la participación cívico-política para hacer cambios en la comunidad y en las leyes que nos afectan.
There have been cases where women have called the police when they are going through domestic violence and they end up calling immigration.
Me encanta porque no nomás a mí me benefició a mis niñas, a mi familia, porque de vivir en un refugio embarazada con mi niña de 1 año y medio y no tener un hogar, ahorita ya tener un trabajo, un hogar y que mis niñas estén alegres en un ambiente saludable, me siento bien, me siento orgullosa de mí misma y sobre todo que estoy ayudando a la comunidad, que es lo que me satisface mucho más.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for bearing with us with the technical challenge there. We wanted to share that video because it's such a beautiful story. And now we get to chat with Maria Jimenez, who works with Mujeres Unidas y Activas. And Maria, in the video, we heard about the two parts, that Mujeres Unidas has two parts to your mission. Can you tell us about those two parts and what they mean to you?
Sorry, I think the interpretation was on mute. Thank you so much for having me and for inviting us to share about our double mission. Our double mission talks about how the first part for the women is the personal transformation, how they work to achieve changes in their personal life through raising their self-esteem. And the second part, which is also very important, has to do with when the women are able to transform the environment, the community within which they work to achieve social justice, working with the civic political participation. So the first part is very important. It takes us to the second part, which is transformation and becoming a community leader for each of the women.
Thank you. And Maria, I'm seeing that the Spanish speakers cannot hear you on the conference line. You can press *6 to unmute so that they can hear you. Okay. So thank you for sharing. Oh.
Sorry, Maria can't hear the interpretation, the Spanish language interpretation.
We're good now? Okay, great.
Good now.
So Maria, thank you for sharing about the two parts of your mission. Can you give us an example of how you have been able to build community power for social and economic justice?
Yes, a very beautiful example that I wanted to share was how all of those women that we were talking about and that you were able to see in the video were able to identify which are the most powerful problems that were affecting us in the community. And the work that we perform as immigrant women was stem to the top, which is cleaning homes and taking care of children and taking care of elder people. The women identified that that was a job where they were suffering a lot of exploitation and they weren't getting paid a living wage, and they were also not. It was also not being recognized by ourselves. So that campaign that we decided to initiate had to do with talking about how we could improve the living conditions that we as Latina women and domestic workers face in a very hostile work environment that was full of disregard. And I would like to mention with a lot of pride that our women, we work to take care of children and clean the homes of other people and take care of their loved ones, but we're not valued and recognized for that work. And we're even less, we're also not paid for that. properly. And it's a work that women need to be able to disrupt violence cycles and to become economically strong and to sustain their family. So those situations took us to launch a letter writing campaign for domestic workers to get dignity and for their work to be recognized. Towards this purpose, and with the support of other groups that motivated us, like our sisters in New York. Just a moment. Okay, I just did it. Does that work? Okay, so that plan, that campaign, it was beautiful because the women decided themselves that this was a situation that was affecting them, and with their stories, their testimonies, they were able to empower themselves and introduce a Bill of Rights with several points that favored domestic workers. Schwarzenegger, first time, he didn't veto it, but then we insisted and we were able to get the first Bill of Rights approved that gets paid paid overtime for domestic workers. I can't hear. Either.
So sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you. That was such an important campaign and such a groundbreaking win. Thank you for sharing that story. So I know we want to reserve some time for folks also to ask some questions here. So I want to let the viewers know that if you have a question for Maria or for Mimi, you can ask questions through the chat function or the Q&A, and we'll take a couple of those. And to get us started, Maria, I wanted to ask how you at Mujeres Unidas are responding and resetting your strategy in the current moment after the presidential election.
It's been a very sad moment, a very hard moment. Like Moni was saying, it took us back to Prop 187, which was one of the propositions that really woke in all of us in the group, awoke a desire to change the living conditions that we were facing. 187 was the first big job, big organizational job we did of like civic participation that we did. And we had the opportunity to feel that we won. Even though we lost, we did manage for 187 not to be passed in California. So now, many years later, this is even worse. It's more painful. Our families are living with a lot of fear, a lot of sadness. The children wake up asking their mothers if, are we going to leave, or are we going to stay? And it's really cruel to hear, it's really painful to hear women talking about that in our meetings. So our organization has created a space of mourning where we've been able to cry, where we've been able to heal, and as Mimi said, to respond from a space of love, not of hatred. Even though we feel that we are scapegoats for everything that is happening, we do want to recognize that we are working at our level and at our own pace. When the women are ready, we're going to start fighting. But first, the impact has been so great. First, we need to cry. First, we need to rebuild our confidence and respect for our movement that requires that we are whole and brave.
Yes, that's so beautiful. To start with coming together and recognizing the connection and community that you have, validating each other's feelings, and to be able to build together from there. So we have one question that was asked from Susan on the chat. One thing I have seen in MUA's work is that many women show up saying they're okay, their family is okay. They come for a specific thing like an English class. Then as they spend more time there, they realize that there's more to explore about their own experience internally, their sense of self, and in their families. And there's a consciousness raising that happens. And the question is, how or if this ties in with the political consciousness raising and mobilizing that you also do.
I think that one of the magical parts, as we could call it that, is when a woman feels that she has a power, when the woman feels that she has a voice to ask and change the living conditions that she's experiencing. But above all, when she feels that she's not alone, and that shame of suffering domestic violence, that hardship of not being able to speak English and not having documents, maybe it's not a limiting factor to change or to join another 20, 50 women who are feeling exactly the same way as you are. So not feeling alone and feeling that Mujeres Unidas provides the tools, training, but especially the power to elevate yourself and to believe that you have the skills to fight for your own causes without waiting for somebody else to do it for you. We do have allies, but we want to feel that we can also change our own environment.
And Maria, can you tell us about your leadership training and the process that you go through?
Yeah, the leadership training is very intense, and the women say that it's the key. They say it's the training that opens the key to knowledge, and it gives us the opportunity to transform ourselves. Many of the ladies arrive without any formal education. But what the leadership training designs, it creates self-esteem sessions to finalize and treat and deal with all of the traumas with which we arrive. After that, we talk about what are the roots of the problems that we have. Why did we have to migrate? Why do we have domestic violence in our lives? We're not guilty for all of these situations. When we understand the roots of the situations that we are living with, and we understand the power, the pyramid of power, it can free us from a lot of negative messages that we've received. After that, we talk about how do we plan a campaign? What are the components of a campaign? Who is the target? What are the sessions we're going to perform? What's the goal? How are we going to bring allies to the campaign? After that, we have the very interesting part of practices in public. How do we speak publicly? How to talk to the media? How are you going to tell your story for your story to be a component to be able to convince allies? How are you going to tell that story in a powerful, strong way? And at the end, and we love this part, at the end we have the celebration. We give the women a diploma, and their families, the children, husbands, boyfriends, come, and that day we have a big celebration, but the children also start to feel a huge pride for their mothers. They see her with a diploma, and they start to see her active, and then we invite them so that they can also be a part of the planning for campaigns. We tell them of actions and how they can also be involved.
That's such a great example of how we can engage our personal network, starting with the people closest to us in our work to create social change. So again, I want to offer, if anyone has any questions for Maria or for Mimi, you can ask in chat, and another option is in the Q&A, and this is for Mimi. How do you do strategic navigation as a collective process? What are important principles when you develop strategies as a team?
Wow. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that we won't have unanimous strategy and decision making. That there actually does need to be different kinds of strategy, and that is part of what is powerful about a movement. I know that even in this very moment, I know that folks on the Movement Strategy Center team, we have different roles that we play, and different, some of us are actually focused on a very critical set of work around resistance right now over this next month. Some of us are continuing to build and really deepen the capacity of key movement builders to build 20, 30, 40-year visions and plans. And that breadth has to come together. And so building the strategy, there's going to be debates, but at the end of the day, I think it's important for people to just move where there's appetite and to test out and see and come back together, because the shared vision, I think that's the most important. How can we have the trust that our shared vision, our commitment to each other is at the core? It's someone, I think, Merv, he's with Blackbird. I've heard him quoted several times, we can move as fast as the speed of trust. And I love that quote. I think that's very, very, very real.
Yes, and the practice guide that we're offering available to download connected with this webinar is that strategic compass framework that Mimi introduced at the very beginning, and that talks about different guide points and how to use those to develop strategy together. So there's another question for Maria about MUA's work. Can you talk about the personal transformation work, and how does that support your members to be strategic, whether it's in their personal lives or in their political mobilization?
I think that one of the key elements of the work of empowering our women is to start by helping in their personal processes, right? Satisfying some of the needs with which the women arrive. But the most important thing is to involve the leaders in the processes of planning actions or searching for solutions to the problems that we're dealing with. They mention with a lot of joy or sometimes anger when we only want to bring them to the action. They want to be involved in the planning stage as well. What action are we going to do? What media is going to be there? Who's going to speak? Who's going to write the signage? I think one of the good aspects of transformation which has worked for us is precisely that, developing the leadership of the women, and they establish to a great degree the direction in which we're going. So to feel that the survivors, that the women themselves are at the center of the actions that we take, and they tell us in which direction we're going to go.
That's such a beautiful example of how you are weaving together all four elements of transformative movements. How you are setting vision together, and how you are practicing the kind of world that you want to create in the way that you do the work together, in the way that you listen to each other and affirm each other and also move together, and the importance of the depth of a relationship there in developing your strategy. Thank you. Mimi, I wondered if you, there's a new question that just came up in the chat. Thank you, Susan, for all of your questions. Can we talk about fierce love in practice? What does that mean? Yeah, and particularly in this moment. And so this question is in the chat if folks want to see the details, and maybe you can get us started.
So I thank you so much for that question, because I'll admit I struggle with that. And the night of the election, I was on the floor. I didn't feel any love. And I guess I want to take something that I've learned from this movement that I think is a gift that you all have to offer to movements of climate, around restorative justice, around, there's a gift that you all have, which is that the kind of violence that you and that we all face is especially intense because it's intimate violence. And it is confusing to both be harmed by people we love deeply. And I think it is this movement's insight, gift, real struggle with what does real repair? What does forgiveness look like that is not just, take over, do whatever, it's not taken lightly. And I think the insights that you all have, I want to learn from, and I have learned from, while the forces of white supremacy and patriarchy and dominance are intense and real, and we can't be naive about it. When people are holding us down, you can't just let that happen. And yet our capacity to hear and listen and see each other's humanity, I deeply believe is the only path forward. And it's what we teach our kids, it's what I teach my daughters. And I've had my personal fights, and that kind of hatred and anger is damaging to me. And so I would put that back to Maria and to all of you on this webinar. What do you have to teach about fierce love?
And Maria, we have just about 1 minute to share final thoughts.
I think that one of the things, thank you, Mimi. I think one of the things that works for us in organizations is to start by having that self-love as women, to forgive ourselves all of the mistakes we may have committed, and also to try to fill our head and our heart with positive messages. Maybe we didn't have the opportunity to grow up in a healthy environment, but it is time to change those messages and to start to respect ourselves and to start to think that we do deserve good things, and that we are the first ones that have to change for others to change. If I change, my environment will change. But if I get in that place of wanting to change the entire world, I don't think change is really going to happen. Maybe it will, but it'll take more time. But we start by giving ourselves hugs, greeting each other, respecting ourselves. And it's very interesting to see how it's actually very difficult to hug ourselves, to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes. But when we start by healing, that starts opening and expanding towards being able to work with allies, being able to work with other communities, being able to work with our families. So I think that fierce love has to start with ourselves.
Thank you so much. As you were talking, I was reminded of the June Jordan quote, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." And the stories you shared really brought that to life for me. So we're at the end of our time together. Thank you everyone for joining us. I want to particularly thank Mimi and Maria for taking the time to share their wisdom and stories, and all of you for sharing so many great ideas and reflections on the chat. As we mentioned earlier, this is the 5th in a series of 6 webinars on transformative movement building. The next one will be Tuesday, December 13th. It will be on transformative strategy. So how can we develop strategy for transformation? You can register on www.movetoendviolence.org. There's also more details there. This webinar has been recorded and a link will be emailed to all of the registrants. You can also visit the website for the link and to download the practice guide that we mentioned earlier today with the strategic compass framework. And finally, we'd love to hear your feedback so that we can learn and improve. We have a short feedback form that you can access in the chat box, and you will also receive the link by email. Finally, I just want to give one more plug for the campaign that we launched today, Lead with Love, and you can access that online at leadwithlove.vision. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you back here for the final webinar of the series. Thank you so much.